Welcome to the 28storms.com tropical weather update for Monday, June 27th. Today, much of the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Eastern Pacific are quiet, but now we see that tropical wave beginning to move into the southwest Gulf of Mexico and Bay of Campeche, and that will set the stage, more than likely, for tropical development over the next 48 to 72 hours. Here's the latest tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, and now their probability for tropical development in this area is up to 30%, which is technically code orange, and I fully suspect that these probabilities will continue to gradually increase as we get closer to the timetable for development, which appears to be right before the system makes landfall in mainland Mexico. Also, some noteworthy news: the National Hurricane Center Hurricane Hunter aircraft is scheduled to fly into this system to see if it is formed into a tropical depression starting tomorrow, and they also have a flight scheduled for Wednesday. In addition, this is now called 95L Invest, which also means that the National Hurricane Center will begin running the tropical model suite on this system, so we will have a bit more model guidance to look at fairly soon. Here is a regional satellite view this afternoon, and as we can see, day by day and little by little, this system is gradually becoming a bit more organized. We see a little bit more convection compared to yesterday, and a little bit greater concentration over the central and northern half of the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, there's some question as to where exactly the main surface low is going to develop, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. But before I show you that, let's go ahead and also look at the enhanced infrared. And all of that competing convective activity that was located in the eastern Pacific is beginning to diminish as the more dominant system begins to set up over the southern Gulf and Yucatan Peninsula. In terms of upper level conditions, conditions really aren't fully favorable just yet. However, they are expected to become more conducive over the next 2 to 3 days as an upper level ridge that is currently suppressed toward the south begins to spread more into the open waters of where this system will be heading. If we look at the latest SIMS wind shear analysis, we still see that there is light to moderate wind shear over the Yucatan and southern areas of the Gulf, and that's thanks to this upper level trough that's still draped across much of the northeast Gulf of Mexico. However, this trough is expected to amplify a bit more toward the east, which will allow this upper level ridge over Mexico to begin lifting toward the north. Now, if we take a look at the latest 850 millibar vorticity, this will give us a good indication of where any surface low may be at least trying to form in its infancy stages, and it looks like it's more focused now toward the lower half of the Bay of Campeche and the southwestern half of the Yucatan Peninsula. If we take more of a local visible image, we can see a bit more low-level turning near or just east of Laguna de Terminos, around this area right here. But I would not be surprised if within the next 24 hours we begin to see more of a concentration of low-level vorticity close to the northern half of the Yucatan Peninsula. Due to the presence of some wind shear and just the relative disorganized nature of our tropical system at the moment, much of the convection is still displaced well to the north of where the current low-level center is located, and I fully suspect that we will see some relocation with this system until we begin to see more organization. Not only does the latest satellite trends give us the indication that a new low will form a bit more toward the north, but some of the most recent model guidance is also suggesting the same. If we look at the latest GFS 850 millibar vorticity forecast, we see that the model correctly initializes the most vorticity over lower Yucatan and the southern Bay of Campeche, but look what begins to evolve over the next 24 hours. We begin to see a second impulse come off the northwest half of the Yucatan and begin moving a bit more toward the west-northwest, and it becomes entangled in the broad overall circulation, but nonetheless that is the biggest or most positive vorticity max that the model is beginning to pick up. And it keeps it over the open waters for another 69 to 72 hours, which is more than enough time for intensification, and the GFS has become in a bit more aggressive compared to the last 48 hours of forecast runs, and it's now beginning to show at least minimal tropical depression or tropical storm formation. It is no surprise when one looks at the upper level forecast from the GFS that the model is beginning to become a bit more aggressive. This is the 54-hour shear pattern, and as we can see, that's a fairly favorable upper-level ridge just to the east of Tampico, Mexico, and any organized surface low underneath that upper-level ridging would have no excuse but to become a tropical depression or minimal tropical storm in that type of environment with very warm sea surface temperatures at the surface. The latest Canadian CMC forecast model run is in very similar agreement with the GFS. The only difference is the Canadian shows a landfall about 24 hours quicker than the GFS. And as I set this into motion, you will see that within 30 to 36 hours, it really begins to tighten up with our tropical system down there, forming into a more organized area of low pressure. This is more than likely a tropical depression in this model run, and by 42 to 48 hours, it's making a run at becoming Tropical Storm Arlene, just as it's making landfall near Tampico, Mexico. We can also see that much like the GFS, the Canadian is refocusing some of the vorticity currently located over the southwest Yucatan a bit more toward the north within the next 24 to 36 hours. As I set that in motion, you begin to see it come off the northwest tip of the Yucatan, and it's continuing off toward the west-northwest. This is in 24 hours. And then by 36 to 48 hours, we see more steady intensification up until the time the system is expected to make landfall. And it looks like it's going to come in roughly around Wednesday morning, give or take about 12 hours. Also, much like the GFS, the Canadian is showing a fairly favorable area of upper-level ridging right along the Mexican coastline, as this system is expected to become a minimal tropical cyclone as it's coming inland. Even the highly conservative UK Met forecast model is beginning to pick up on at least some organization over the next 48 hours. As you can see, we start off with really not many signs of an organized surface low down here, but in 24 hours we begin to see a 1007 millibar surface low just to the east or southeast of Tampico, and by 48 hours it's beginning to move inland while still showing some signs of organization. Last but certainly not least is the 12Z ECMWF. Keep in mind the European is easily one of our better forecast models, and over the last 1 to 2 days it's been sniffing out development much better than the other models have. And the model correctly shows the greatest area of low pressure down here, and then in 24 hours it begins to refocus itself a bit more toward the north in the northern half of the Bay of Campeche. And by 48 hours it's really taking off. This is more than likely a strong tropical depression, possibly already a minimal tropical storm. And by 72 hours, this is around the same time frame that the GFS is bringing the system inland. It's taking the system a bit north of Tampico as a fairly well-established tropical storm. Now certainly if the GFS and ECMWF are correct with their timetable for development, that's roughly 2 to 3 additional days of time for this system to get its act together over open waters and favorable upper level conditions. Finally, just to reiterate why we do not expect that this tropical cyclone will pose any danger to the United States Gulf Coast is because every single model member is showing a very strong area of mid-level heights over the central United States, focused in and around much of Louisiana and Texas. This is a really strong area of ridging, and there will be no place for this tropical system to go but westbound underneath this large subtropical ridge, bringing a lot of drought relief to areas of central and northern Mexico. Now it looks like southern Texas could get some very light rain, possibly a couple inches of rainfall, but that is the max that I really think that you guys could possibly get. So just to sum everything up, I am highly confident that this will become our first tropical depression of the season, and not only that, but I have a very strong feeling that this will eventually become Tropical Storm Arlene. Thankfully, even if it does become Arlene, it's going to be a very weak tropical storm by the time it makes a landfall in roughly 2 to 3 days near or just north of Tampico, Mexico. The effects along the United States are expected to be very minimal, with no more than 1 to 3 inches of rainfall along far southern Texas. Otherwise, the primary rain is going to be going into mainland Mexico, where they desperately need it. So stick with 28storms.com for more comprehensive analysis of this developing tropical cyclone. And again, the rest of the deep tropics are fairly quiet this afternoon, but over time we'll continue to look elsewhere in addition to monitoring this developing Invest 95L as it makes its run toward mainland Mexico. So that's your tropical weather update for today. Check the website later for more frequent updates and another video by tomorrow afternoon. Have a good one.